Today marks the 63rd anniversary of the adoption of the Freedom Charter, and to mark the event, 2 original copies of the Charter have been officially authenticated.
Well, these are the only remaining copies since the Charter was adopted on the 26th of June 1955 in Kliptown, Soweto. They have now been handed over to the Lilies Leaf Museum by Arts and Culture Minister Natim Tetwa.
We are here today for a slightly different reason, because here at Lilies Leaf Farm and at the National Archives, those 2 institutions had the authentic documents signed by 5 presidents of organizations who signed the Freedom Charter in 1955. So it went through a process of even getting to the government gazette in July last year. So we have 2 authentic documents, which from here, it gives us a proper basis to further take it and canvass UNESCO to be the international document.
Well, there you have it, 63 years since the adoption of the Freedom Charter in the country. But some analysts are saying that it's an outdated and unworkable document in contemporary South Africa. Sara Gon is a policy fellow at the Institute of Race Relations. It's a think tank that promotes economic and political liberty. We chat to her now on the line. Good afternoon, Sara, and thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Hi, good afternoon.
Sara, you've written that this seminal document is archaic and unworkable. Tell us why you feel so strongly.
Okay. I recognize entirely its historic value and it being a very meaningful document in terms of the history of this country before and through the period of apartheid in particular, and it has a great deal of resonance. The problem is that it wasn't. I don't believe it was then nor now a blueprint for how you actually practically run the country. It was drafted in an era when much of the ANC were also members of the Communist Party, and it was in a period in which the relationship with the Soviet Union was at its height. And in the 60-odd years since, the world has changed so much that the success of a country economically depends on a very different set of factors. And in that respect, I don't believe it can be adhered to.
Of radical economic transformation that we're hearing so much about recently is still very rooted deeply in the Freedom Charter. But today the African National Congress is no longer a liberation movement but a political party. Are you saying that they should somehow deviate from using this document as a reference point for everything that it does?
I think what any political party that would govern a country such as South Africa needs to deviate essentially in a pragmatic sense, because the document itself is a set of principles and desires for the country, but it doesn't contain the practical reality of what it is one actually has to do to achieve the result. And I would argue that currently we need a much more pragmatic, hard-headed set of policies that are needed to be implemented in order to achieve any form of transformation. This doesn't derogate from what is believed and is meant by the Freedom Charter, but I don't believe it is the Charter itself that paves the way, that gives us the way forward.
Sara, how do you think that the majority of South Africans relate to this day, especially seeing that we have a new generation of South Africans who have a very different relationship to the state than their forebears?
Yeah, I think the problem is it's a problem one would have probably anywhere in the world in the context of the history of any country, and that is that it is very real and will have a deep meaning and emotional significance for people who grew up during the period or immediately after and everything that went with it. But there's no doubt as generations arise and the further they get away from a historical period, the more issues become symbolic, documents become symbolic. They reflect the history, but the history itself is not really alive anymore.
when it comes to the values espoused in the Freedom Charter, Sara, there was such a great deal of expectation on post-apartheid South Africa and our fledgling democracy to be a champion of human rights and non-racialism on the globe, but we still see problems manifesting. We struggle with incidents of racism and the challenge around social cohesion. How do these incidents impact on the public consciousness, do you think?
I think it's a very vexed question, because in the view of the Institute, a lot of the issues that are headline issues for the ruling party, we did not believe are necessarily uppermost in the minds of South Africans. I think people are the key thing for them are the very practical bread and butter issues of jobs, and with jobs comes income. With income comes better schooling, and with better schooling you get advancement. And I think that in a way, that in essence is anyway seeking to transform the society. I just think we have to be much more realistic about what we can do in order to achieve it.
Sara, another emotive issue in the country, and I have to ask this before I let you go, at this point is land and its redistribution. Now, the Charter clearly states that the land shall be shared among those who work it. Can you share your thoughts on land expropriation and without compensation, and how this relates to the Freedom Charter? Because you've written that merely taking occupation of farming land is insufficient at this point without the proper training and capital support to our farmers.
Yeah, we, as you know, the Institute has taken a very strong position against expropriation without compensation, because we believe that, firstly, in any event, the Constitution does not prohibit any process per se from being used, but also because we believe very strongly that private ownership is crucial to developing economic wealth, because as soon as you have ownership of land, you have the ability to raise capital on that land, and that instantly provides a basis for growing. Our main concern is that the expropriation that's envisaged by the government vests ownership in the state, and we believe that the state must serve the people, not the other way around. The state is there merely to assist us to get what we need to best live our lives. And we really don't like the idea that the state will obtain ownership of land rather than the individual.
Sara Gon is a policy fellow at the Institute of Race Relations, joining us on the line there from Johannesburg.